Well, thanks for having me tonight. This is a really great space that I haven't gotten a chance to be in before, so thank you. My name's Kristin Burrows. I work at the Environmental Quality Board. We're a state agency, super tiny. There's 9 of us, and that's a lot right now. And we are tasked with, so we have a board of 9 agency leads, commissioner level leads, as well as a citizen member from each congressional district across the state. So we're a big board of a lot. I don't want to do the math right now. And our task is to work on emerging environmental issues and bring those agencies together and really talk about how we can collaborate and work on environmental issues at a really high level and try to focus that down a little bit more to the action level. And one thing that is underneath our purview are Minnesota environmental review rules. And so in statute and in rules, we have an environmental review program. Not every state in the U.S. has a program. Ours is pretty robust compared to some other states. There is a national level environmental review for projects that fall under national purview, but ours is unique, to Minnesota and how we operate and how we facilitate our rules and projects that undergo environmental review. So I know you guys are here tonight, or at least I was asked to be here to talk a little bit more about the environmental review program and specifically the AUAR, or Alternative Urban Area-Wide Review process, which has been proposed for the specific project in your neighborhood. And so that's what I'm here for. I'll take other questions. I do, want to be clear that the environmental review, or environmental quality board rather, is not the decision maker in this project or any other environmental review projects. We facilitate the rules. We provide technical assistance, and we, help through the process, but we do not make decisions. And so I cannot answer, any specifics about what may be the outcomes of this particular proposed project, nor am I the project proposer. I do not know this project. I guarantee you all know this more in detail than I do. And so, when it comes to specifics on whatever it might be, I'm not going to have the answers for you, unfortunately. But
can you say one more time what you do with the rules? You facilitate the rules, or you set the rules?
I should be very clear when I say that.
No, I just
they are rules that fall under the Environmental Quality Board. We did just undergo a rule change, so we do have the ability to go through that process. But, really our role is to provide the technical assistance around those rules.
So who sets the rules?
The legislature.
Okay. Thank you, though.
Yep.
Right. So,
Yep. And we provide technical assistance to citizens like yourselves. But we also provide technical assistance to the governmental units like the city or state agencies that are reviewing the environmental impacts that a project might have. And we also provide technical assistance to project proposers or developers that are undergoing large projects that might cause environmental impacts. And so we, have multiple meetings and provide assistance wherever we're asked.
Could you just briefly define an example of a technical assist that you think? I'm a technician, so I know that in my industry, technical assistance can be integrated in many ways.
This is a good point. We're always trying to work on plain languaging, what we're talking about and making sure that we're being clear. So when I say technical assistance, I just mean, answering a phone call and trying to walk someone through the process, or providing them, if we don't have the information or specific details that they're looking for, trying to network and provide, the right contact for them.
So if I needed to test the phosphate level in the river.
That is not something we do. Correct. Nope. We are desk people. Correct. Correct. So we only at the Environmental Quality Board have and use Minnesota environmental review rules. So we have our own program. Anything at that federal level is a completely separate process housed by federal agencies. So our board is, who we report to. It's made up of commissioners from 9 state agencies. And so, they are kind of our bosses in a way. But, beyond that, the governor's office.
Jennifer,
No, you do not have housing.
So you said 9 state agencies. What 9 state agencies?
Yeah. Test my screen. I want to make sure I'm still on here. You're going to test my knowledge here. Okay? We've got the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the Department of Natural Resources, the Department of Transportation, Minnesota Department of Health, DEED, Economic Development and Employment. Okay, that's 5. We have, it's actually the chair of the Board of Water and Soil Resources. I gotta go through my agriculture. Thank you, Department of Agriculture. I'm at 7. This is really fun for me to do. What are other environmental related? I said MPCA. I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna look it up for you guys.
If I could just do it, maybe
Commerce, thank you. That's really hard. Department of Commerce and no, they're not. We're on there. It'll come to me. Don't worry.
So maybe for some context, do you cover the Mississippi Recorder Curricular Area rules? So those rules would apply to this process.
Yeah, so that is.
I know overseas those.
Yeah.
Could you repeat what John asked so everybody can hear it and it's on there?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just so it's yeah.
Asked if the Minnesota Environmental Quality Board oversees the Mississippi River Corridor Critical Area. Thank you. Rules. Yes, there is a connection there. And it's outside of environmental review in the way that it's written in the rules. So I'd have to go back and talk to our water staff to really understand that better. But yes, there is a connection there to the board.
All rules. You got technical assistance.
Correct. Certainly. Now it's really bothering me. I can't think.
How about an example of specific example of something down here before?
Related to environmental review or just more in general? In general, another project I've been involved with is an interagency team, so staff from multiple agencies looking at the effects of emerald ash borer in the state of Minnesota, so specifically on how that impacts community trees. In fact, I was just looking before I got here that this big tree out front was slated to be removed. And, but more importantly, we have more ash than any other state in the U.S. when you start getting into our ash forested areas. And how are we dealing with that? And, it becomes a much bigger question of, how does that impact us in terms of our environment, our air quality, but also what do we do with the waste? That tree gets cut down and how many others and where's it going? How are we set up to handle that? And so those kinds of questions where it doesn't fit under just the Department of Natural Resources anymore, because now we're talking about waste, which falls under the Pollution Control Agency, or we're, looking at facilities that fall under the Department of Commerce because they do energy facilities, and there are facilities that create energy by burning wood. And so, there becomes a much bigger picture when you start bringing in multiple agencies at the
Review
same time.
mediated then?
We do a lot of facilitating, but really it's just it's a conduit, when directed by our board members to say this is an issue we want to really look at further into. That usually results in an interagency effort, a team of technical experts and staff that can really come together and identify some key solutions or next steps that we can be taking. And then typically the board will review that and provide additional direction, or at that point assign it to an individual agency.
So your agency can bring the other agency to the table?
Yes, we meet monthly. Yep. More or less.
So on your process of how you work, do you ever get ahead of a schedule of a development so that it can push standards or integrate with multiple?
Yeah, so that really, takes me to the AUAR process. So I can, jump into how that process works. So with Minnesota Environmental Review, we have 3 different documents, typically, mainly that we look at. And so our rules have mandatory categories that we say there's a certain threshold that if this type of project, let's say it's a power plant, is producing this many megawatts of electricity, once they meet that threshold, they're going to need to undergo environmental review. There's a certain, some legislator or some bill or some technical experts at some point decided that was the number that we were going to reach. And so that's, set. And so that's kind of reactive. And so that falls under the environmental assessment worksheet, or EAW, or if it's a larger project with a larger impact potential, an EIS, environmental impact statement. And so those are the 2 main documents that you typically hear about, probably in the news, or associated with other projects, like Line 3 is in the news a lot, right? And so those are our kind of normal processes, more or less. We do have alternative processes, and this is the one that the city of Minneapolis is proposing to use for this particular project.
Why do they get to choose?
So under Minnesota Environmental Review rules, a governmental unit gets to choose the process that they use based off of different rule criteria that we have, but this alternative process in particular is a combination of the EAW and the EIS processes that I mentioned earlier. So it's kind of a hybrid process that is used in cases, your initial question was EIS. Your initial question was, how can we get ahead of a project that's being proposed? And the alternative, it's really hard for me to say this is why we'll use acronyms. The Alternative Urban Area-Wide Review, AUAR, yes, is a process to do just that. And so really what was identified after our initial rules were written back in the 1970s was that some process needed to be developed to allow for a project site that doesn't really have all of the plans finalized, but that as a whole, the space is going to be developed. And so my examples for this would be a hospital campus or a college campus, those larger sites where we know something's coming in, we know that space is more often than not being redeveloped. And we want to take a look at what that space could be. And so the AUAR process actually looks at multiple scenarios. So there tends to be a low, medium, and high impact scenario, if not more, that are used in that review process. So, potentially a no build. What if this, stayed as is or was turned into park? what would the impacts to the environment be for that specific project, or could be, versus high impact. What if it was all sky rises, and how would that look like? And so our governmental units that undergo this process, this process differs from our EAW and our EIS processes, which are usually, we know that we have a project in place. A project proposer or developer is coming in and saying, I am building this warehouse, and here are my plans. I'm ready to apply. Let's move forward. That, there are defined numbers and impacts that we can look at in that case. So the AUAR is different in that we really want to get ahead of this. We want to make sure that the project is, right for this space. We want to be using this information to better develop the final plans for the site. And so it becomes more of a planning tool. And I shouldn't say that, more of a planning tool. All of environmental review documents are planning tools. They are not decision and applications in that sense. They are to help better inform the decision makers on what conditions or mitigation needs to happen as a part of the project. Sorry, my computer.
So the only time you all come in is if a project is being initiated, not if something is already there. Because in the space that's already there, from what I understand, and in that area, and in all of North Minneapolis, the air quality is horrible over here. So the only time you all come in when a project, what about now? What about present time? So what do you do now? Or do you do anything at all?
Yeah, so
Try and repeat the question.
sure. So the question was, what happens now as...
Nope. The question is, in the existing time now.
Yes.
What do you do now? Or do you only, does the AUAR only step in if a project is coming? What about now? Because the air quality in North Minneapolis is horrible. Now, present.
Yep.
So you're going to step in and say, oh, well, the air quality or whatever's going on this is what it is to move forward, or now?
Right.
How does that work?
I'm trying to see if people online could hear that okay. But I have no video of anyone. So the question was, if there are environmental impacts or effects that are happening now, what can be done outside of the environmental review process? Yeah, so environmental review specifically is in response or in preparation of a proposed project.
So then you all don't do anything in present tense with things that's going on currently?
That would not be not the Environmental Quality Board per se.
Why? Let me finish. Because last week we were at the meeting, and they showed how climate change is affecting areas in this area. And so the air quality and the water and all that, they showed us this last week. So then that means it always has to be a project going on somewhere in order for you ought to stay in business, because if you don't do anything with existing space, then something always has to happen in order for you all to be beneficial.
Yeah.
Maybe a different way to ask it. Does your board have any role in the ongoing monitoring of environmental quality area? Maybe there's a different agency that does that.
So I think that's one question. Does the Environmental Quality Board have any role in actual monitoring of
right now
of air quality, specifically
right
in North Minneapolis?
Correct.
Correct. That is not a role that the Environmental Quality Board plays. Like I said, we're 9 staff.
Yeah.
We are, we have specific statutes and rules that direct what our role is as a state agency.
What I'm asking is, so then it's always a project somewhere, because that's where you all come in. That's how you continue to stay functioning, correct?
We don't actually do the review. It's governmental units, so any city, county, township, watershed district, or state agency actually does the review of the projects that are happening.
Can I ask a question about that?
And then Michelle.
Okay, go ahead.
As Ajay was saying about cumulative existing,
Mhm.
for example, and I didn't understand this, the health impact assessment that was discovered by East Phillips and Karen Clark in 2008, we did a demonstration that showed the cumulative impact of the air, cancer, deaths, parks in Phillips and in North Minneapolis and over the whole city, right?
Mhm.
That's a health impact assessment that was tabled, under the table for 2 years. Just came up, it's published. It was created by 5 organizations. After the first hearing that it ever had at City Council, we went to speak to Connor's assistant, because that's her district, and he said these words: well, that impact assessment was not done by the city unit, so in essence, it doesn't matter. All the recommendations, the money that was spent on it, the 5 agencies, because it wasn't done by us, that was the inferred meaning of what he was saying. So you just said something about having a study done, like this is another, but that a city agency has to be the one that does it.
And they can hire whoever they want,
Right.
maybe.
I don't know.
Because this is I think the issue that I'm having, thank you for that, but I think the issue that I'm having is you all are helping the legislative process to make sure they're following the rules, whatever, right? And for a new project. So what about the people that's here
Right.
now? What's going on now? It's not you.
Yeah.
It's MPCA.
Yeah.
Right, the organization only comes in when it's something that's gonna be built for something else. But what about the people
Right.
that's here now?
Right. And those regulations fall under local ordinances, or the Pollution Control Agency does air quality monitoring and testing, and I don't work for them, and so I can't speak to their processes or rules, unfortunately, but I, be happy to put you in contact with their air quality staff.
But that health impact assessment was done because they wanted to put the roof deep on the plan. But say it's like parallel to what's happening for Harbor.
Mhm.
They had $5 million, they had a plan, they put it forth, the city threatened them, and then property and disregarded. The thing didn't exist, and the health impact statement showed the existing, what it would do to make that worse. And it blew my mind.
I should clarify, you said health impact assessment, which is not under our environmental review
Yes.
rules, and I know that gets confusing because we use some of the same
No,
words,
no.
but I do want to clarify, yeah.
And that was what Connor's assistant, that because it wasn't this, the 5 Nexus was one of the organizations. Let's be clear, I'm hearing that 200-page study by 6 organizations
Sure.
was not a lens for looking at the additional stuff that was already happening.
All right, looks like Michelle has a question.
So these are exactly the questions I had sent you, right,
Mhm.
yesterday. And the fact that we want to find out what's happening now before the study gets done. Because, for example, air is one of the concerns because of GAF and the shingling plant that's on the river. But another concern is soil. And so if that's not a part of the AUAR, and it doesn't sound like it would be what's happening now, who would do soil?
Okay, so I wouldn't say that is not a part of the AUAR, because the point of environmental review, or the AUAR in this case, is to identify what the potential impacts are of a proposed project. So looking at the site as a whole and the surrounding area of what those impacts might look like. And as a part of that, there are, often, depending on the project and the site and the location and the governmental unit, interest in those impacts, are often reports or studies as part of that. Because the point of environmental review is to get information on the project to go back and redesign something or to add conditions, because in this case it would be the city, undergoing that environmental review. Now they have information to say, you know what, we need to put a condition on this specific permit because we have concerns about what that might cause in terms of environmental effects. And so it is really a planning tool to help with the permitting and approval processes. Good tip. When environmental review is happening, there is a prohibition on any approvals. So nothing can happen at the same time that environmental review is happening. And that's designed on purpose because it's a planning document. How do you move forward with something if you don't have the plan finished?
So as far as soil, so just real quick, so as far as soil goes, and they should be looking at like what's in the soil before, because we've got all these different things on the river, right, that are contaminating, and there's railroad tracks, so there's all sorts of things. So they should be looking at what's.
I can't speak to the specifics about what the city in this case should or shouldn't be looking at, since I am not the project proposer, and I am not the city who will be using this document to make decisions. But there is a question in there, for example, of contamination or hazardous materials. All of the air quality is a question that they will have to respond to.
But back to we went to the Booze at the meeting last week, and so there's a whole report about the air quality and everything here that's already been done. So then do you all look, because that's the meeting we were at last week. So then do you all look at that and along with what they're proposing as far as the bill, and then make a decision or a support or non-support or whatever you do from that information? How does that work?
So the end decision of an AUAR is it adequate or not? Does it have all the information that it needs, which then closes that review process and moves forward towards final design and permits, approval, construction.
So your company ultimately gives the stamp of approval to say whether what happens if this project pass the standards or the quality control ordinances, if it can happen or not. Is that what you're saying?
Not to the Environmental Quality Board. That would be the city of Minneapolis.
So then what do you do?
I come to meetings with you guys.
And do what?
Is this all hypothetical, or is there a UAR being done as a right now?
Nothing has been started from my understanding, but they have decided that the city would like to use the AUAR as the tool.
And who's they? Who's they that's decided?
The city of Minneapolis.
And it appears in a contract, the exclusive rights agreement. Has a timeline addendum. That says the AURA will be done in last summer of last year.
January.
So
Of last
you
year.
said that the AUAR looks at low, medium, or various alternatives. But what does only really one alternative put forward? How do you react to that?
So in the process, and I'm not sure there are different paths you can take in the AUAR process, and I'm not sure which one the city of Minneapolis will do. But more often than not, we see a scoping process as a part of this. And so that will be, the city in this case, identifying what those different scenarios might be, identifying the boundary of the project area that they're looking at, and giving that out for public comment.
So the public can ask for, we'd like to see a
Yep.
set of scenarios here.
Correct.
Scenario A, B, C.
Yeah, so that's exactly the time for the public to come back and say, what if this vision that we have as a group were on one of the scenarios to be looked at, and then they can consider that as a part of the review as well.
Can we go back one minute though, because Michelle and Erica just said that in a report it says that the AUAR was supposed to happen last January, but you said that you all didn't. You haven't been a part of the process, didn't you?
Right, you're not there.
It's not been initiated.
It-
It
this-
hasn't started yet.
It's not me or the Environmental Quality Board. We do not do the
Well, you know
process.
that's the rules, so here's a rule question.
I'm not familiar with that contract
Let her
or.
ask a question.
Oh, okay.
And then
Repeat it on the mic.
I got it now. I'm getting like what, like this is like one of those, I get the rules of this conversation now and what kind of question.
I don't, so clear that for me, bring it
I'm
home,
trying to
'cause I
like-
need some of that.
If, for example, there is a contract that says this study will be done before it continues, and that contract, this is a rules question, right? Just tell me if I'm wrong, and the contract is extended without having done that, while the language in the contract, specific language has been changed to say, when the concept plan is approved, this project will go forward.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer and can't answer that for you.
No, I'm just saying there's gotta be some legislative rules about meeting the process.
I'm not sure. If it's a contract, it's it's not, it doesn't fall under
They have their
state
own rules
rules.
within the contract. Yeah. Yeah.
First
Which
down,
was just
United
extended.
Crop,
Yeah.
that's right, and I think
First
the
have been
extension
signed
of that,
up.
I think the extension of that, I'm not definitive,
Yeah, no, I know.
I think the extension of that. My understanding is the extension of that at all.
Yeah, the developer's gonna end up suing the city for all the
Could.
costing the
It could.
developer.
But,
And United Crop was gonna.
yeah, yeah, something like that. Michelle's got an AQB question and I have an AQB one.
Kristen, did you say that the AUAR then gets passed as adequate to the city?
Correct.
So, okay, the city is setting it up, bringing in their own narrative of it, and then deeming it adequate.
And please repeat that. That's
Yeah.
a very good question.
So Michelle's question was, is in this case, would the city be reviewing the AUAR and deeming the AUAR as adequate or is as adequate or inadequate? And the answer to that is yes, with public comment multiple times as a part of that process, and with the opportunity for state agencies or the Metropolitan Council to oppose that determination or that decision.
How often does that happen? The state agency comes in and
I would have to review
What state agency is that?
any state agency.
Any state agency?
how do we get the state agency involved?
So these state agencies, yes?
They all.
Certainly any of those.
Those are
Okay.
commissioners.
And then there's other ones.
Yeah, I don't believe that I'd have to double check our rules, but I don't believe our rules specify which agencies could or couldn't do that.
So it could be the director of the housing agency, Jennifer Ho.
Yeah, I'll-
Was sent by the governor to speak to the.
I can look into that to see for
Thank
sure.
you. For,
Oh, am I ahead?
well, so in the, like, being able to hire your experts to weigh in on the environmental review process, what parameters are there for hiring, sort of, I guess, unbiased or true environmental reviewers rather than somebody who's pro-development and prone to, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Maybe ensure the minimums rather than the maximum standards. We're in this. How does selection happen? Yeah, information bias. Thank you. I don't even know what I'm asking.
We actually just a few months ago, as the Environmental Quality Board in partnership with the Minnesota Department of Administration, launched a master contract that we call, which vetted and reviewed consultants that provide those services, and now has a master list of qualified and vetted consultants as a part of that, that any local government or state agency can utilize.
Can but don't have to.
Local governments do not have to. State agencies do.
What you just learned right now, how you can restate that?
I guess my question was, all right, so Michelle asked a question about the environmental review is chosen framed, consultants are selected and approved all by the same entity to get their proposed project done. So there's not a diversity of review in doing this that represents them. Legislative laws that were passed on behalf of people. So where is the access point for the people or for, challenging questions or dissenting opinions?
And that's really a highlight of the Minnesota Environmental Review Program because it does allow for public participation, unlike a number of other state processes.
So maybe we can talk more about that.
Yeah, and I can pass here. Actually,
I just looked up the Ford site, St. Paul, the whole EAW, all laid out to the whole process, not EAW, AUAR. It says the first step in the AUAR process for the Ford site is preparing a draft AUAR order and scoping environmental assessment worksheet. The draft AUAR order identifies the development scenarios to be analyzed in the AUAR. The scoping EAW summarizes existing conditions and defines the level of analysis completed for the AUAR. After considering comments received during the 30-day public review comment period, the development scenarios and scope of the AUAR are final.
But Jane and I were just at the PUC today, the Public Utilities Commission, and we know that public comments get screened through staff.
That's right.
If screened at all and passed, or if passed along at all.
Yeah.
And so it's not even guaranteed that they see your public comment.
with the environmental review process, public comments, according to rule, any substantial public comment must be responded to and be made as part of that public decision document. And so comments are considered, it's part of the final decision document. So it is published and all of the comments are published and responses to those comments are published.
So last week, the Attorney General was saying, in terms of Northern are very, very important because they become part of the legal record.
Yep.
So that's what that is, right, John? The comments are.
If you go to the Ford site, AUAR, it's got all the documents, all the comments.
So does everybody write their own AUAR or are there standard guidelines for any AUAR?
Yeah, so AUARs start with the standard list of questions that we use for the EAW forms.
Okay.
So there are identified questions that ask for, specifics around how much waste is this going to generate.
Okay, so there's a standard set.
Yes.
Okay.
And you can expand on that, certainly.
Okay, I heard you speak to every, agency, state, local, federal, but you failed to mention the, Supreme Law of the Land, tribal organizations. How do you interact with the tribe?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I'm sure you're familiar with state law and tribal communities don't fall under state law, and so it is a separate process.
That's not my understanding. Explain that.
So in environmental review, if a project were on a tribal reservation,
The entire state of Minnesota is
on
we didn't give up their rights. We were underneath the soil, the air, or the water.
Okay.
So we're always responsible.
I apologize. There are certainly opportunities to engage through the public comment process, but when it comes to, a tribal reservation has a separate process for anything on that specific piece of land that does not fall under Minnesota environmental review rules.
May I say that all those commissioners from all of the by the government to meet with the Chippewa tribes and their all the tribes were together, all the tribes in the state were ordered by the governor to meet with all those commissioners. And
They all work for the tribe. That's the partnership. Just like National Park System takes care of like tribal land and ceded territory. That's why they're responsible for the agency around the lawn.
Right, and I apologize if I came off unclear, but our rules don't apply to.
I'm going to speak because an exile from the state, but I just want to be very clear that there isn't, the city cannot own the title to this land. It is my Washington territory, and we will be working with the title. So I ask, please, I think it's something else how you plan to.
That would be up to the city, since this is a city
No,
document.
It's not though. I can show you the application title. And it's not part of the agency, it's for Mendota Street, but correct.
1838.
Yeah. The one that.
1837, 1851 treaties. I think where, maybe, going back to PPPs, the governor has asked each state agency to come up with a plan to engage tribes.
Right.
I don't know that all the agencies have done that yet. I don't know where they're at on it. Some are more ahead than others.
Right.
And so, the state agencies haven't been like the federal government, where the federal government is required by law and regulation to engage federally recognized tribes specifically. There hasn't been the same thing at the state level.
Actually, are you gonna totally ignore the fact that the governor has a governance document, like this federal law?
So the state doesn't have that same relationship with tribes that the federal government
The
has.
governor just declared, made a declaration, a whole document governing the government.
Yeah, so the governor of Minnesota just
State.
asked the state agencies to develop a consultation process and an engagement process. I don't know where all the agencies are at in that process right now. It takes
Go back to her answering my question.
you saw some of it, yeah.
I would like to.
This is the city's review, and there are project proposers in the process. That is something that they will need to work through.
So EQB does not work.
No, we certainly do. We've had multiple meetings with tribal topics being addressed. I specifically work with the Green Step Tribal Nations program, in which we engage with our tribal communities on sustainable actions, as well as climate change. Excuse me?
Not within the city.
We work with recognized tribal reservations, or whoever would like to work with the Green Step program.
I mean, that if in the AUAR process, how do you intend to tackle tribal interests within?
That, again, is for the city and the project as a whole. Certainly the Environmental Quality Board can't review and do every single project that's going on in Minnesota. And so that's left to the role of the governmental unit that's overseeing the project.
So when the governmental unit that's overseeing the project fails or decides not to engage with these parties, they are exercising a violation of the Rights Act of 1964, which stipulates that you have to seek informed consent, and it also is the United Nations that with tribal people. And this governance to governance piece is really important in that regard, because the governor is saying we are going to interact from a government to a government, and we are going to pay attention. And here's the most, to me, the seed, the kernel of hope. And Elizabeth has educated us about this, and we've been to this the Council of All Tribes in Minnesota, meeting with the Council of All Commissioners. And that is this: the environmental regulations and rules of that other governance are more stringent than ours. And there is some federal regulation and law that says, as I understand, from one government next to another government, if this government has more stringent protections, we're supposed to adopt those. So that's the piece I think is really what we're getting at. So the AUAR, can I say that out loud? The
AUAR.
What does it stand for?
Alternative Urban Area-Wide Review. That's why we shorten it.
Alternative Area-Wide Review is a process chosen by the city that has no rules in the state of Minnesota that say how they have to open an RFP to bring those folks on, or with what considerations they have to adhere to. And as I understand it, federal law precedes state law supersedes city law, right? That's the hierarchy, systematic hierarchy that we're unfortunately working under. Right. So what happens when an AUAR fails to have an equitable inclusion of agencies that can do that review, what happens when an AUAR does not exercise informed consent? And what happens with when an AUAR is used to pass a development?
So the AUAR does not pass the development. It is a planning tool. And so all of those, conditions can also happen again, more or less, engagement can also happen through the permitting and approval processes that governments have on a project. And that is why environmental review documents include public comment and engagement through the process that way, because really our citizens are our eyes and our ears across Minnesota. And so, identifying what impacts are not being addressed in that document, or, bringing up additional concerns that haven't been talked about, now you have an opportunity as an individual to come in and say, this is a concern that wasn't addressed in here. We'd like to see, this, and this. And now that governmental unit has to respond to that and say, this is why we'll go back and include this, or we're not going to, this is why we're not going to include that, or we've considered that, and it'll be, something that we'll address in the permitting process.
And do you mean a secondary governmental unit? Because if you're asking the governmental unit to self-check themselves, that's their own feedback loop, and we're looking for outside resources to keep a governmental unit in check.
And that's often a critique of the environmental review rules that are set by legislature. And so, when there are concerns about the process not working correctly, that's something that you can take to your legislator.
Attorneys and paid staff.
With or without attorneys and paid staff, in a civil rights violation, underneath the directive of the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, whether the Attorney General
but nobody's
has a state agency that doesn't have to take it on, but he is from our community.
But we don't have representation now, right?
What?
Nobody's representing this voice, this process,
Well, he is actually, he's starting to have a conversation.
Okay.
And there have been three meetings so far, and he's slowly coming, but, he has other considerations too.
Right.
He has a whole staff of folks, but it is his duty to address. And so the reason I know that we all said the same thing at the Attorney General's comments.
Right.
What's that gonna do?
Right.
We all said we've been commenting a lot, but maybe officially entering into the record a bastion of comments from every single one of the activists in our community about very specific issues, like you violated Civil Rights Act 6 in this, what I mean? Yes, we need lawyers, but we can all also point a finger to it. I mean, informed consent is a very specific thing around provision of interpreters so that you know what's happening to your body. And how I'm understanding it is that the cumulative effects that are taking place and exist already, and there's this many deaths from cancer, and there's this many deaths from heart attacks, and there's this many children with asthma, and on the maps that Karen Clark created, it's a cloud of dust of cases that are super heavy over Northside and over Phillips, and not over the rest of the whole state. That's a failure to inform those parents, children, and people that their bodies have been compromised by the cumulative effect. So, informed consent, if you fail to inform the people through an official process like this, you have failed to meet the requirements of informed consent, which exist in every single hospital and legal courtroom and education center, because we've been sent out as interpreters.
And you're operating under the law, you're representing people's policy representation.
Not you, but people that do this, right?
Yeah, well, they could be held personally accountable too.
So we're at 6:25, and this opens up some adherence to set standards, right? Which can go any number of branches. we've got an environmental review specialist here who can help us maybe focus if we want to have next steps or at least an understanding as to challenge for us.
Should we have a petition started at this point?
Yeah, that was another question that I think Michelle and I talked about a little bit of. So there are, I know you're familiar with the citizen petition that's happening in the on the Hiawatha project. Yep. There is not a citizen petition process for the AUAR, but in fact there doesn't need to be because the city's already agreed that they are going to do an AUAR process when there's enough plans in place to move forward with that. And so there really isn't a need for a citizen petition. You're welcome to send one in. But yeah, the citizen petition, according to Minnesota rules, is actually only for the environmental assessment worksheet. And so, if there's perhaps there's one building that's being proposed sooner than others, maybe that would be an opportunity to petition for that. But
and then is the federal responsibility going to be different in the subsection? The National Park System, the Park Board, and the city, will there be 3 separate studies done, or will it be the overall process?
That would be a part of the scoping decision that the city would do when they start the review process. So they would identify what those boundaries are and what they're including or what they're not including in that review. And then the public would have a time to respond to that and say, we really want this included or something.
So if we don't feel like the city is doing enough, is there anything we can do?
Enough review in general? If the city's not doing
Enough for the land, the water, the community in regards
in terms of conditions that they're actually putting in place.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that the answer to that part of it comes with the permits and approvals following the review. There's certain conditions that they can put in their decision. But there's again, this is a planning document for the next steps. And so things are getting redesigned as they're starting those permitting.
So wait, can we finish this question?
Yeah, and Steve.
Yeah, so what can be done with the permits and stuff?
I can't speak to that since I'm not the city and I.
Okay, but going back to my question,
Any of your comments as a part of the environmental review process will help inform the city in this case with the appropriate information to make decisions or add conditions or change designs with the project
they haven't been listening
proposer.
to us at all.
No, the city
They
is,
listened to us.
the entity that we're talking about is the same one that threatened eminent domain to the people and bought it out. It's the same entity that passed the flying colors in the contract without having met the terms of the contract. The same one that last week didn't give a full hearing to the health impact assessment and cut it off. And and no one listened to it because they didn't create it, which is bizarre.
Right.
An outside organization created it, so they don't have to. It's exactly what you're saying.
Right.
The city has the ability to vote or not.
Steve Dunn.
About and I appreciate you giving us helpful, but in terms of the different environmental assessment and second capital compared to the other person, what is the development team for UH required to develop? Are they going beyond the Call of Duty by doing the AUAR, or are they not doing it? Then it says for the AUAR, the comment period is dated.
For an update.
That's all I know.
The property.
Yeah.
The final February, the final AUAR.
So that would be after
When
multiple.
is that triggered? How do we know when it's triggered? 10 days?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'll start with that one. If you
It all circles around this.
yeah,
What's required.
So Yeah, there's certain criteria according to our rules that help guide which process the city in this case, could choose. The majority of the projects that we see in Minnesota are under the EAW process.
Okay.
The AUAR is
less than the AUAR.
I would.
More stringent or more rigorous?
An AUAR is because an AUAR is a combination of an EAW and an EIS. And an EIS is more stringent because it looks at multiple scenarios.
So EAW is the lowest.
Correct.
Then it's the EIS. So the AUAR is a combination.
But
Yeah.
the EIS is the most stringent?
According to the mandatory thresholds that it triggers, yes.
It requires major impacts on.
If it's the most stringent, why is it?
So those are final review of the final.
The very last.
I think the next step, I think what we're looking for the city to do is this order and scoping environmental assessment worksheet. So they have to do a scoping process where they ask the public, what are your concerns about this project? What are your concerns about this place? What issue do you know about? You have 30 days there's a 30-day response period that they take that information and then they have to take that to the next stage.
Correct. So
Could you
there's
say that again? Order and scope, blah, blah, blah.
It's the draft AUAR order and scoping environmental assessment worksheet.
and I can't say for sure whether or not the city will be doing that exact process. So like I said, there's kind of two forks for the AUAR process. If it's I don't want to assume what the city is doing,
And I don't want to say, this is what they did.
but Ford site would be a comparable, size to this, and so it's most likely that they would do that because it's for large projects. They call it. This is a large project.
What are the forks?
An official scoping process that has a separate comment period or a shorter review process as a part of that in the document.
So we could say, we would like you to choose this other fork. We want you
Yeah,
to
I
choose
believe
the
you
more
could.
Rigorous fork.
Yeah.
Okay, rigorous fork, okay. Rigorous fork.
I'll pass out this one.
Ask for rigorous.
It's actually
Ask
the
for 300 comments on more rigorous forks. You know, if the time breaks off and you're eating with such a fork.
Yep.
So the more rigorous one with that scoping scenario is on this very first page that I'm passing out right now. It's called the process for certain specific large projects is what they call it. And I guess therefore we call it.
And UHT qualifies.
That's the part I don't know. That's something.
We right away then is the arches. Is that only for financial?
Yeah, so that's all of the energy related ones have separate processes.
So there are times that you
We have not in many, many years.
but Minnesota State Statute 216.36. Sometimes.
Could.
So we could make a comment saying that we want the city to use you as the overseeing agent.
I would have to look into the rules on that. I'm not sure with an AUAR because it's the city that's ordering it.
Well, they said they were gonna order it a year ago, and they still haven't. And then at the same time, they changed some very specific legalese. I hope you all take a look at that. I was the only one there on that day when they extended. No, I wasn't the only one there. There were two of us there, and all of the developers in the room from United Properties were there, and two of us to the day that they extended the exclusive rights agreement. And in that extension and amendment, they amended the language that would make it such, as I understand, that once, which is something Kaylee was talking about, James, Kaylee spoke about it very clearly, but she was speaking about it before the amendments. So the amendments took place after Kaylee had mentioned that contract legalese, making it even easier for, once the plan is approved, with or without the AUAR, it would be to the time that would trigger the purchase of the property.
Right.
And Kaylee is 23 and very wise, and she's on your team, I think.
Yeah, she's about to create. Which is okay for both of us.
So is there anything else we want to get on mic to have this be held in our roundtable learning series? Anything else we want to capture? Because we can talk like this until noon is close, but I want to close out the video portion.
Can we reach out to you by email if we have questions?
You can. I wonder. Well, we have a hotline. So if you're looking to reach someone quickly and efficiently, I would encourage that. It should be on both of the documents, and then the website is, or the email address rather, is env as an environment.review@state.mn.us. So that should be on the documents too. And then we're much more quicker to respond. That goes to multiple people.
Recommendations of agencies that we could specifically, like when we were going down this comment rabbit hole,
Right.
which it feels like that, are there specific organizations that you would recommend, if not be the overseer of the AUAR?
Let's end with that. That's a great question.
To oversee the AUAR.
Well, as we would comment and say, what would it look like if your organization was the government agency overseeing it? Then the next question would be, you as a government agency that is in this business, do you have recommendations? And are there some tribal commissioners, tribal officers also that have some stringent environmental rules that could be recommended to that entity to use for their AUA?
Yes. Sorry, I'm trying to. I think you're asking two questions on who can comment and provide recommendations.
We're going to make that, like, we want to get super specific about our comment, which is Keith Ellison's advice. It's super specific. We get 300 comments that say, we would like your agency to oversee the AUAR. That we're calling for your agency to oversee the AUAR, one, because it's happened in the past. And two, because we would like the AUAR to bring forth a fair RFP of stringent organizations that would uphold the rule of law or the spirit of law in the environmental justice law and all the other ones that regulate this.
Yeah, I think that's almost a question of before the AUAR process would start. Because once the AUA process starts, if the city of Minneapolis is, ordering that, then they're the governmental unit that'll be reviewing and organizing the comments. State agencies regularly also review and comment on projects, so they're looking at this already from a technical side, and will more often than not be providing comments through the process as an additional overseer of what's happening.
Well, we want someone in charge of this outside of the city.
Yes.
So we were asking, originally, I think, to have the EPB be the overseer. But if we weren't going to have EPB be the overseer, then we would ask another state agency, correct? Erica?
Yeah, I mean, if we unite across all these factions of groups and say it's critically important for the critical area rules to specify which organization we are calling for this organization to oversee the city's AUAR, and open an RFP for recommended people to but the thing that was most troubling just now that I heard you say is that the city overviews the comments, they filter the comments? Or can these
They
comments be
collect
made
all
before?
of the comments through the process and respond to them.
But this is before that.
Yeah.
I think the part one of your question, it would be before the AUAR would be ordered.